La 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 da da dum ya dum ba dum ba da dum. I want to read something to you. I'll just start now, even before the clock finishes. It's from this week's Torah portion. We're reading from Torah portion Mishpatim that we read this morning in synagogue. This is from the book of Exodus, chapter 24. And now that the countdown is almost down, I might as well wait until it actually finishes. Good evening, a good Vach, Shavua Tov, a good week to you, my holy sisters and brothers. It's spectacularly joyful to be starting the week learning with you. Let's light up the darkness. I'm going to read something to you from Exodus 24 in 1 minute. We have a very short daf tonight, a very short page of the Talmud. So we have a little bit of time to do this. Let me just welcome Paula, who says she loves it, and the other Paula in the Great Northwest, Karen in Northern California, Bill in Missouri, Melissa in Great Neck, Gail is here. Paula, is that you singing? It was such bad singing, it could only be me. Gail from Kansas City, Lucy in Minnesota, Bella in Florida, Hannah saying Shavua Tov, Keith wishing us good wishes, Sharon in New Jersey, Joe in the Inland Empire. Welcome everybody, and Aoife in Florida. So last week's Torah portion was Yisro, named after Moses' father-in-law, Jethro in English. And that's the Torah portion that contained the Ten Commandments, right? And the greatest moment in human history when God revealed God's self at Mount Sinai and gave the Ten Commandments, and then from there proceeded to give the entire Torah to Moses. Now, people always associate that Torah portion, Yisro, with Matan Torah, the giving of Torah. But the giving of Torah was not completed in that Torah portion. It continues into this week's Torah portion, and I'm going to read that sort of second half of the giving of Torah, the description of what it was like. But before the account in the Torah of the giving of Torah at Mount Sinai sort of continues, it's interrupted by the bulk of this week's Torah portion. I mean, now we're in a new week actually, but last week, and then we read it this morning in synagogue, was Torah portion Mishpatim, which means laws or decrees, right? So we had this incredible, moment, greatest moment in history, a moment where, it was almost like the whole division between heaven and earth slipped away. And for a moment, it was all one world, God's world, and heaven above and earth below sort of kissed, as it were, in this moment with millions of people witnessing the giving of Torah by the Lord. Just so holy and exalted and spiritual of a moment. Now, he gave us a body of law. And so before that account of the giving of Torah continues, we get into some of those laws, not just the Ten Commandments, but a whole bunch of laws. And so this last week's Torah portion, which we read this morning, has so many laws, it actually opens by how you will treat a Hebrew slave, like when one of your own becomes enslaved, and that would happen one of two ways. A Jew would become enslaved to a Jew if he was so poor that he sold himself to pay his debts, or because he was a thief, and the court sold him into slavery. Now that's temporary slavery, 6 years, so that he could pay off, what he stole. And even though he's a thief, somebody would take him into their home, and then they could not treat him sort of in any less dignified a manner than any other fellow man, right? So you had to treat your fellow Jew like a fellow Jew, even if he's a thief who was sentenced to be enslaved so he could pay off his debt. And then a bunch of other laws follow, including the very famous eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, which does not mean eye for an eye. And the sages explain very carefully why that was always intended to mean that one pays financial damages when that kind of harm is done. And a whole bunch of other laws are in Tractate Mishpatim. We read them all this morning. About a lender and a borrower and a paid guardian and many laws. And the basic concept is this idea that we don't have two realms in the world, right? Just as heaven and earth kissed, as it were, when the Torah was given, so too the holy and the mundane are always intertwined in the sense that a Jew who is bound by all of the commandments given in the Torah, even at work, has to conduct himself in a holy manner, in the sense that if you're ever entrusted with the property of another, that's a sacred trust, right? And you have to, whether you're an accountant, or a stockbroker, or a banker, or a farmer, or a herder, or an auto mechanic, a doctor, a lawyer, no matter what you do, you have an obligation to be fair and scrupulously honest with the property of others. And if you cause someone damage, you have to pay for it. And you have to pay for all the different kinds of damage that you might have done to somebody. So this idea of holding an entire population up to a high standard of conduct, and that it's a holy thing to be honest, right? It was new in the world at the time that Torah was given, and it was a spectacularly beautiful code to live by. And tragically, the people many times fell below that standard with terrible national consequences over our history. So at any rate, over the course of this Torah portion, many of these kinds of laws are given. And then the narrative, right? So what is the Bible, a storybook or a law book? Yes, it is both. So having given a bunch of these laws, now it returns to the story. And so at Exodus 24, and I was just moved to share this, and this does not touch so much on the daf we're doing tonight, but I just want to share it. It's quick. So to Moses, God said, go up to Hashem, right? Go up to God. You, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and you shall prostrate yourselves from a distance. Now, what does it mean, go up to God? God is everywhere. We're in God. But God had caused a manifestation of God's presence to be seen and felt at the mountain, right? At Mount Sinai. So says God, so go to Hashem, go to that place where the presence is. You, your brother Aaron, Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, the older sons, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and you shall prostrate yourselves from a distance. And Moses alone shall approach Hashem, but they, the others, shall not approach, and the people shall not go up with him. Moses came and told the people the words of Hashem and all the ordinances, and the entire people responded with one voice. And they said, all the words that Hashem has spoken, we will do. And Moses wrote all the words of Hashem. And he arose early in the morning, and he built an altar at the foot of the mountain and 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent the youths of the children of Israel, and they brought up elevation offerings. Well, that we will be talking about today. Elevation offerings are burnt offerings. And they slaughtered bulls to Hashem as feast peace offerings to Hashem. We'll be talking about that too. So there's the connection. Now Moses took half the blood and placed it in basins, and half the blood he threw upon the altar. And he took the book of the covenant, the Torah, and read it in earshot of the people. And they said, and by the way, the commentary says the whole Torah hadn't been written, but those parts that had just been given, that's what he read to them. Or maybe it's just the 10 Commandments. And so he read that to the people. So just a portion, a small portion of the Torah. And having heard that, the people said, everything that Hashem has spoken, we will do and we will hear. The famous saying, Na'aseh v'nishma, right? We will do and we will hear. Normally, you would think that if people are giving commandments, they would say, okay, whatever we hear from God, we will do it. But they said, no, we will do it and then we will hear it, right? We will do it and then which is translated to mean we will do it and then we'll understand it. In other words, the people had reached this place where they had absolute trust in God and in his prophet Moses, and they were ready to commit without knowing what they were committing to. And that's so often in life, what you have to do, you got to take that leap. And you got to just start doing it so you can understand what it is that you're trying to do and the new life and the new stage in your life that you're setting into. Sometimes you got to just start doing it, and then you'll understand what it's really all about. And that's what the people did. Na'aseh v'nishma. Moses took the blood and he threw it upon the people, meaning a sprinkling, and he said, "Behold the blood of the covenant that Hashem sealed with you concerning all these matters." Now Moses, Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu, and the 70 elders of Israel ascended, and they saw the God of Israel, and under his feet was the likeness of sapphire brickwork, and it was like the essence of the heaven in purity. And against the great men of the children of Israel, he, God, did not stretch out his hand. They gazed at God, yet they ate and drank. And Hashem said to Moses, "Ascend to me to the mountain and remain there, and I shall give you the stone tablets and the teaching and the commandment that I have written to teach them." And Moses stood up with Joshua, his servant, and Moses ascended to the mountain of God. And to the elders he said, "Wait for us here until we return to you. Behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a grievance should approach them." Moses ascended the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. And the glory of Hashem rested upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for a 6-day period. And he called to Moses on the 7th day from the midst of the cloud. The appearance of the glory of Hashem was like a consuming fire on the mountaintop before the eyes of the children of Israel. Moses arrived in the midst of the cloud and ascended the mountain. And Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And you can see, since what they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, was before Moses was up there for the 40 days and 40 nights. That's why the chronology requires sort of the tradition for us to understand, well, in what order did things happen? And even having said that, the tradition has a machlokas. There's a disagreement over exactly when did the people say Na'aseh v'nishma. But for sure they said it before the bulk of the Torah was received. They were ready to commit to live a Torah life. And that was sort of our highest spiritual moment as a people. Okay. Just wanted to share that. I was so moved this morning thinking about that and kind of this incredible, group transcendent spiritual experience that we had there. And it was sort of like the mass. Everyone saw the presence of Hashem on the mountain and the mountain quaking in it. But most people were afraid and said, "Moses, you go and listen and get the law for us, because if we keep experiencing this direct interaction with God, we're all going to die. Our souls are going to fly out of our body." Okay, and God said, "They have spoken well. That's what we're going to do." But nevertheless, God said, "But you can take the people who can sort of take it, as it were." So Moses didn't go alone. He went with his brother's 2 older sons, and these 70 elders, and they had an absolutely, indescribable in words experience of the presence of the Lord, and their souls did not fly out of their body. They were even allowed to eat and drink in the presence of the Lord. It was an incredibly joyous feast, as one can imagine. All right, we are in Tractate Nazir. Today's page is 26 here in chapter 4, continuing our discussion of mission number 3 in chapter 4. And we are continuing our discussion of the offerings that a Nazir brings at the conclusion of his Naziris, and what happens if he allocates animals to be those offerings or money to purchase those offerings. And then in the case of a woman Nazir who had her vow nullified, she no longer needs the offerings. Or somebody who was a Nazir and went to a halakhic authority, had the vow nullified, no longer needs the offerings. Or somebody who is a Nazir and he dies before bringing those offerings. But the money or the animals themselves had been designated to be the offerings. And what do we do? And it's going to be a little bit of a different outcome depending on which offering we're talking about, whether it's the sin offering, the burnt offering, or the peace offering. We pick it up at the bottom of 25b. The Gemara returns to the issue of the offerings of the Nazir. The master, Rabbi Yochanan, said earlier, it is a law with regard to a Nazir that his unallocated funds, meaning money he set aside to purchase the offerings that he's obligated to bring at the conclusion of Naziris, he set aside that money, but he didn't specify which portions of the money are going to be used to purchase the sin offering or the burnt offering or the peace offering. He just had a pool of money for those three offerings, so that's considered unallocated funds. So it is a halacha, a law with regard to a Nazir that his unallocated funds, including the value of the sin offering, are used for the purchase of gift offerings, right? If he can no longer use those offerings to be brought as a conclusion of Naziris, because, for example, he died and now his heirs have to use that money, they can't just keep the money because it's consecrated money. It's set aside for the bringing of offerings. This can only be done when the temple is standing. So they have to use it, but they can't bring offerings of Naziris. They're not Nazirim, right? Only their father, let's say, who died and left this money as set aside, was the Nazir. So what do we do with that money if it's unallocated, if none of it has been specifically designated for the sin offering? That's the real issue there, is the sin offering. So then all that money can be transferred into a different kind of consecrated money to be used for gift offerings, right? Gift offerings, elevation offerings, same idea. But the point is that if some of the money had been set aside for a sin offering and it can no longer be used for the sin offering of the Nazir, that's the case where that money can't be used for anything at all, and it has to be destroyed. And so the manner of its destruction recommended in the Talmud is to cast those coins into the Dead Sea. So the issue that's being asked here is, well, if you have a pool of money and some of it is for a sin offering, don't we have to take some of that money aside and throw that in the Dead Sea, and the rest can be used for gift offerings? And so the law is, well, but if the pool of money, none of it was specifically designated for the sin offering, then all of it can be turned into gift offerings, according to this view. Now, this formulation indicates that this law pertains only to a Nazir. But is there no other case where the surplus goes toward the purchase of gift offerings? If you're just joining us for the first time, what is a Nazir? One who takes a vow, specifically described in the Torah, to abstain from products of the grapevine, not to cut his hair, not to become impure for the dead, for instance, by entering a cemetery, and to bring these offerings at the conclusion of the term of Naziris. So, are there any other cases, not Naziris, where there is unallocated funds that might include a sin offering, and then we're going to turn it into gift offerings? Is there no other case where the surplus goes toward the purchase of gift offerings? But isn't it taught in a Baraisa, which is a teaching contemporaneous with the Mishna, but not quite as authoritative, and the rest of those liable to bring nests by Torah law? What are we talking about? These are poor people who are obligated to bring only a bird offering. For example, a poor leper, right? A mitzora. A leper is not somebody with leprosy. We're talking about a mitzora, somebody who was stricken with a disease that no longer exists, spiritual malady that manifests in a physical blotching of the skin, called tzara'as. So when he's cured of his tzara'as, he has to bring certain offerings. If he's poor and he can't bring a sheep or a goat, etc., so he brings a bird. The Torah makes that possible for one who is poor. So those paupers were obligated to bring only a bird offering. For example, a poor mitzora who must bring 2 turtle doves, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering, instead of a male sheep or a female sheep. And now we're on 26a. And this poor mitzora, so he separated money for the nests, right, for this pair of doves. And then he became wealthy. So now he can afford more, right? So if the owner wishes to change the designation of these birds and to bring an animal sin offering with them, so he may bring a sin offering with them. And if he wishes to use them to buy an animal burnt offering, he may bring it, supplementing the required amount with other money. Now, if the owner died and he had unallocated funds, they will be allocated for communal gift offerings, including the value of the sin offering. This shows that the law that unallocated funds may be used for gift offerings applies in cases other than Naziris. So maybe what is this responding to? Something said, well, in the case of a Nazir, we do this. But evidently, it's not only in the case of a Nazir that we use unallocated funds to purchase gift offerings to bring in the temple. So the Gemara answers, the Tana of our Baraisa taught the case of a Nazir and also the case of those obligated to bring nests, like the poor Mitzorah, which is similar to that of a Nazir and is therefore treated identically with regard to its law. This serves to exclude that case, which is taught in a Baraisa. The situation discussed in the Baraisa involves one who is obligated to bring a sin offering for a transgression that he committed. Right, so as we've seen, sin offerings, right, the sin offering is the chatas. Sometimes they're brought because you unintentionally came to violate a commandment, right? Like, for example, you did work on Shabbos because you didn't know that day was Saturday. And when you realized it was Saturday, you said, okay, I made a mistake. I am now liable to bring a sin offering. If the temple is standing, you can bring that sin offering. That's an obligatory sin offering. That is to actually make up for a sin, to atone for a sin, as opposed to the sin offering that's brought at the conclusion of Naziris or at the conclusion of Tzara'as, which is not so much, atoning for a sin. Rather, it's just a procedural element of completing your Naziris or completing your purification from Tzara'as. So now we're talking about somebody who did commit an Aveira, right, an unintentional sin, and he became obligated to bring a sin offering. So this is a sin offering to atone for a sin. Now this person was obligated to bring a sin offering for some transgression that he committed, and then he said, it is incumbent upon me to bring a gift burnt offering. And he separated money and he said, these are hereby for my obligatory offering. Now, the sin offering he was obligated to bring because he committed a transgression unwittingly and became liable to bring the sin offering. The burnt offering became obligatory for him to bring because he made a vow. He said, it is incumbent upon me to bring this gift offering. At that point, a gift offering, which is purely voluntary, once it became the subject of a vow that he made, at that point, it too became obligatory. So, one at the conclusion of Naziris or Mitzvah has to bring a gift offering and a sin offering. That's a procedural offering. This guy created a similar situation. He was obligated to bring a sin offering for his sin, and he made a vow that he would also bring a gift offering. So now he's liable to bring the same two offerings, but for a very different reason. So what happens to this guy? Then and then he allocates money, right? Or he allocates birds. And he says, these are hereby for my obligatory offering. What did he do? He spoke ambiguously. Makes no sense what he said. Or rather, it's too general a statement. Right? He should have said, this bird is for my sin offering and this bird is for my gift offering. But instead he said, these are for my obligatory offering. Now, since he might have meant either his obligation of the sin offering or his obligation of the burnt offering that came about because of his new vow, so the question arises as to what should be done with the money. He can do whatever he wants with the money because he said, okay, he's going to use it for those two things. But if he dies and that money was basically, these are unallocated funds. They're designated for his offerings, but he didn't specify which money is for which offering. So the Baraisa explains that even when he's alive, if he wishes to bring an animal sin offering with it, he may not bring one. And if he wishes to use it to purchase an animal burnt offering, he may not bring it either. And if he died and had unallocated funds, one must take them and cast them into the Dead Sea. Since the two offerings are not part of the same obligation, the unallocated funds may not be used for gift offerings. Because these were not connected, right, as being procedural sin offering plus burnt offerings because of the conclusion of Naziris, so unallocated funds where it's designated for both offerings, but not for, which in particular, since he wasn't specific about that, and these offerings are not linked to each other than by the fact that they're the same person is obligated to bring them, but they have no real connection to each other, one because he sinned, one because he just made a vow. The fact that he has this designated money that's unallocated means that he kind of messed up, and that money has to be thrown in the ocean. Now, that's according to this view. The law doesn't come out that way. The law comes out that it is like the Nazir's situation, and that they can be turned into gift offerings if he wants to. But if he dies, it's going to be problematic. It's going to be problematic. All right, one who is obligated, here's the law. One who is obligated to bring a sin offering. If one was obligated to bring a sin offering, and he declared, I'm hereby obligated to bring a burnt offering, and he proceeded to separate money, saying, this is for my obligation. If he wishes to use it for a sin offering, he may do so. And if he prefers to purchase a burnt offering, he may likewise act accordingly. So as long as he's alive, the fact that he designated money without allocating which is for which, he said all of it is for my obligation, it's okay. He can still further specify which for the sin offering, which for the burnt offering. But if he dies, then we got that situation where the money that's for the sin offering has to go to the Dead Sea. If he dies, the money is cast into the Dead Sea. And since we don't know which money is for the sin offering, it could be either half of the money, let's say, all of that money goes into the Dead Sea. Some commentaries point out that the wording of the Tosefta contradicts the ruling of the Rambam, as does the Gemara. Others explain that the Rambam may have had a variant reading of the text. So, luckily we don't designate money for offerings anymore since the temple is not standing. So this is an issue that we try to understand, but that doesn't come up. And so people aren't throwing money into the Dead Sea. Now, Rav Ashi said, that which you said with regard to a Nazir who had allocated money, that he may not use it all for gift offerings because the value of the sin offering must be taken and cast into the Dead Sea. Do not say that this is referring only to a case where he explicitly said, these are for my sin offering, and these are for my burnt offering, and these are for my peace offering, each one separately. Rather, even if he said, these are for my sin offering, my burnt offering, and for my peace offering, kind of like group money, all of it is going to cover my sin offering, my burnt offering, and my peace offering, they are considered allocated for purposes of this law, despite the fact that he did not designate the money for particular offerings. And some say a different version of this statement. Rav Ashi said, do not say they are deemed allocated only if he said, this money is for my sin offering, and this is for my burnt offering, my peace offering, or even he said, all this money is for my sin offering, burnt offering, peace offering. Rather, even if he said in broader terms, this money is for my obligation, it is for my obligation, despite the fact that he did not, Rather, even if he said it in broader terms, these are for my obligation, then they are considered allocated. Now, Rava said that which we said, that if one had unallocated funds, they will be allocated for communal gift offerings. This applies only if the money for all of the offerings was mixed together. However, if the money for the sin offering fell and was separated from the others, now all the remaining money is considered as allocated. And this means that instead of the entire sum being used for gift burnt offerings, part of it is used for a peace offering, which is eaten for one day and does not require bread. Right? Like if you separate the sin offering money from the burnt and peace offering money, what's left, the burnt and peace offering money, you can separate that into burnt offering and peace offering. Whereas if the sin offering money is still in it and it's unallocated, all of that is going to be used for burnt offerings only. 26b. The Gemara notes that it is taught in a Baraisa in accordance with the opinion of Rava. If one said, this money is for my sin offering, and the rest is for my obligations of Naziris, and this person died. Okay, so the money for the sin offering is taken and cast into the Dead Sea. And as for the rest, he brings a burnt offering with half of it, and half of it goes for the peace offering. And one who benefits from all of it is liable for misuse of consecrated property due to the value of a burnt offering that is included in the money. But one is not liable for misuse of consecrated property if he benefits from some of the money, as the money he took is possibly that of the peace offering, to which the prohibition against misuse does not apply. Very interesting, right? If money is set aside to be a burnt offering to be brought in the temple, and then you somehow make personal use of that money, or if you set an animal aside to be an elevation offering, burnt offering, gift offering, all the same thing, the ola. So if you set aside an animal to be that kind of offering, and then you use it to work your field, that's misuse of something that is consecrated, and you become liable to bring a separate offering for that. But if you set aside an animal to be a peace offering, or money to purchase a peace offering, and then you make personal use of that, you don't have that same liability for misuse of something that's consecrated, because even though a peace offering has sanctity, if you make personal use of it, it's not as bad. Why? Because the peace offering is brought to the temple, some of its blood is sprinkled on the altar, but then the owner of the offering eats it, right? So he still will benefit from it. Now, if one said, this money is for my burnt offering, and the rest for the rest of my obligations of Naziris, well, the money for the burnt offering goes for burnt offering, and one who benefits from it is liable for misuse of consecrated property. And the rest, meaning that's allocated for sin offering and peace offering, and the rest is allocated for communal gift offerings, because it was not, right, it was designated for peace and sin, but not specified which. And therefore it can still be used for gift offerings if this person dies before the offerings are brought. And one who benefits from all of it is liable for misuse of consecrated property because of the portion of it that's sin offering. But if one uses only part of it for personal use, so the part that he used is assumed to be the peace offering, he doesn't become liable for misuse of consecrated property. Rav Huna said that Rav said, they taught only that there is a difference between unallocated and allocated money of a Nazir with regard to money designated for the purchase of offerings. However, if one designated an animal, it is treated as allocated. A Nazir is obligated to bring 3 types of animals at the conclusion of Naziris: a female sheep for a sin offering, a male sheep for a burnt offering, and a ram in its 2nd year for a peace offering. So even though they're the same species, they're 3 distinct and identifiable animals. It is therefore evident which offering he had in mind when designating a particular animal, right? So if he designated an animal to be part of his offerings of Naziris, and that animal is a female sheep, well, then it's obviously for the sin offering. If it's a male sheep, it's obviously for a burnt offering. And if it's a ram in its 2nd year, presumably it's a peace offering, and that's distinct from a male sheep. So consequently, if the owner died, each offering is treated in the appropriate manner. The sin offering must be left to die, like all sin offerings whose owners have died. The burnt offering is sacrificed as a burnt offering, and the peace offering is brought as a peace offering, although it must be eaten in one day and does not require bread, unlike standard peace offerings, as we've learned. Now, Rav Nachman said, when they say that if one designates an animal, it is considered as allocated, they taught this only if it is unblemished, meaning it is fit to be sacrificed. However, if one separated a blemished animal, if one put aside a blemished animal for his offerings, a blemished animal has some kind of disfigurement, so it cannot be brought as an offering when the Holy Temple is standing and we're bringing animal offerings. Does that mean that your designation is meaningless and the blemished animal returns to the herd? No, it does not. What it means is that the value of that animal, you have to sell that animal, get the money, and use that money to purchase an offering that can be brought on the altar. Right? So that's the difference between a blemished and an unblemished animal. So if one separated a blemished animal, even if he set aside the 3 required types, a female sheep, a male sheep, and a ram in its 2nd year, each one is considered as unallocated. And this is because one will not sacrifice the animals themselves, but will sell them and use the money. However, this is not the case with regard to a bar of silver. If one separated 3 silver bars, they are considered as allocated, as each is a distinct item designated for a particular offering. And Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said even a silver bar is considered unallocated. However, a pile of beams, like used for construction, is not. If he set aside 3 piles of construction beams for his offerings, they are treated as allocated money. And Rav Shimi Bar Ashi said to Rav Papa, what is the reasoning of the rabbis, i.e. Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, who say money and not an animal and not a silver bar, and similarly money and not a pile? Do they maintain that the law of unallocated funds applies only to money and not to other items? However, if that is so, one should likewise say that it applies to money and not birds. And if you would say, yes, so too, this is in fact the case, and birds cannot be considered allocated. But what about this statement that Rav Chisda said? Nests, which is what we call a pair of turtle doves set aside to be an offering, a pair of offerings, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. They are considered allocated only by either the acquisition of the owner, if the owner designates each bird for a particular offering upon their purchase, or by the actions of the priest who decides which bird is for which offering when he sacrifices them. And this clearly indicates that the birds are considered unallocated until they are designated, right? So how can you say that just because he has 2 birds, they're considered allocated? They're not. They're unallocated until he designates which is for what purpose. Therefore, the question arises, why is this so? Didn't we learn this law only with regard to money? And only money can be considered unallocated, but anything else is allocated. And now we're seeing, well, it seems like the birds can be unallocated, silver bars can be unallocated, blemished animals are unallocated. So if Rav Chisda's opinion is accepted, the same laws should also apply to animals, silver bars, and piles of beams. And how are we going to reconcile that? Tune in tomorrow, Sunday night. 6 p.m. Pacific, the normal Sunday time. I should have given you the warning. Let's go to comments and questions on Nazir 26. Bill, I've observed before you aren't as bad a singer as you think you are. But more to the point, I think you're a better chanter than you think you are. There's slightly different skills too. You're very kind. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that very much. And I do believe that a person should not let their complete lack of singing talent stop them from singing. Because it's one of the joys that God gave us, And if you just keep going, even though you're bad, maybe one day a wise man like Bill Eldridge will say, you're not so bad a singer. You're not so bad a chanter. That's what I've got for us tonight. It's great to be learning with you on a Saturday night and starting the week off right, my holy sisters and brothers. May you have a beautiful week, and I look forward to learning with you tomorrow, page 27, Sunday, 6 p.m. Pacific. Good night.